on here, and I hope it's going to be useful. Like I say, I'd like you to tell your story, and then we'll get some networking one-to-ones. We'll be back into the Remo room. Over to you, Tom.
Thanks a million, Brendon. And again, delighted to be here. And I appreciate the casualness, because if you get to know me over the next couple of months or today, so this suits me down to the ground. Listen, I'll just step back a small, but I think it's always good to just kind of give you an idea of where I've come from and, you know, what kind of brought me to the journey that we're on at the moment. So as Brendon mentioned, I'm, you know, based in Cork, down the south of Ireland, have always been in, on, kind of, or around the water. I have to admit, I think that I'm not really an expert at anything. So I've got friends who are professional sailors or professional surfers, but I'm pretty poor at all of them. So I just like it. I just enjoy it, and I've enjoyed it since, you know, a really young age. So we used to spend our times going to a place in Greece called Lefkada. It was in the Ionian Islands. So we, from a really, really young age, my mom and her best friend went traveling. Her best friend ended up marrying a Greek guy, and we've been visiting them ever since. And in this Greek island, it's a tiny fishing village. Tiny, if you can picture the tiny Greek fishing village, but just adjacent to it is this big, massive windsurfing, sailing, one of the biggest hotspots in Europe. So, you know, we used to spend summers going there for kind of 3, 4, 5 weeks, and I picked up windsurfing and sailing and kayaking, and have carried it right through kind of into my I suppose into my college career, and then into what I did after college. And when I'll fill in a bit more in a minute, but we ended up spending a bit of time in Australia, about 5 years, where was very involved with a very large sailing centre over there. And after that, we came back to Ireland, and Ireland was coming out of a recession. And me and a couple of my buddies used to meet for a pizza every evening, and or not every evening, every kind of Wednesday evening, and hash out a couple of ideas. And we were all very much involved in water. So like I said, one of them was a professional sailor, one of them was really into surfing. I just kind of enjoyed all of them. And one day we were actually in West Cork, and spending a bit of time over a beer, and we said, why don't we start there's a product that's used across all of water sports, and it's called a rash vest. And there's not one single company in the world that has ever kind of focused solely on making rash vests. So we had no idea what we were doing, absolutely none. This is about 5 years ago. So we, as anybody does, you know, you think the most important thing to do to start a business is to go and to create a logo, and that's how bad we were. So we went and spent tons of money on doing brand guidelines and all of this kind of stuff. But what we ended up doing is we spent about 18 months really learning an industry. So we'd visit trade shows, and we'd visit, you know, we'd be in Munich, we'd be in Paris, we'd be in London, and really getting to learn kind of how to start a clothing company, and, you know, the ins and the outs of it. And there's very little help, and everybody that you ring would basically say, you know, it took me 3 years to do this, and you're expecting me to tell you how to do it overnight. So there was a lot of kind of trade secrets kept. And we were basically in Munich one day, and I was listening to a guy from Patagonia speak, and he was saying, if there's anybody in this room who's listening to me talk today, who's either in a big company or else is on their kind of startup journey, I'd really encourage you to make it a sustainable company. The fashion industry is the second most polluting industry in the world, and he had this big kind of presentation about the damaging effects of the fashion industry, which obviously struck a chord, coming and spending so much time from, you know, being involved in the water. So we had just finished at that time. We had just finished creating our first prototype, which wasn't sustainable. And we just said, listen, guys, if we really want to be serious about this, we need to go and we need to find a sustainable material, learn the best things that are best characteristics for our product. Is it possible? And at that time, you know, there was very little being spoken about, you know, recycled plastics, you know, recycling plastic bottles into other products or into fabrics. And I'd say we ended up finding about 4 or 5 different fabrics that we ended up testing. You do wash tests, you do wear tests, and there was one that worked. And that was our first kind of, you know, again, it took us about, I'm going to say 18 months to get to a stage where we actually had a sustainable product that early on. And we launched a brand. So I'm now, as you see, we're operating under OceanR is our brand name. And we used to be, just before Christmas, we did a rebrand. We were called Rasher. So we were selling rash vests, sun protection, sustainable, and we did okay, you know, but we never really broke the Rasher consumer brand, you know, selling direct to people. We never managed to get it to a level that would sustain a team, I suppose. So we were in stores in San Francisco, we were in stores in Melbourne, in Brisbane, in the UK, and it was something that was, you know, it was something that we were madly in love with. But at the end of the day, it really wasn't supporting, again, like you said, a young family. But what was happening really early on was that we were getting contacted by teams and events, which was what happened really early on. So one of the early ones was we got contacted by Yachting Australia, and they basically said, guys, we're promoting sustainability at our event, and we'd love to use your fabric and your product as the kind of giveaway for the event. I was like, well, that's not really what we do. And they're like, well, we'll pay you full whack and we'll pay you up front. And I was like, let me just talk to the team and we'll come back to you. So it was, I would say I was telling this story yesterday to some college kids, and this is how early on it was. It was cheaper for me to fly the product there to Brisbane than it was to ship it. So I got on a plane on New Year's night. I missed New Year's and flew to Brisbane, handed over it was about 700-800 units for the sailing event. And I was on the ground there meeting, you know, other yacht clubs, sailing clubs, other territories or states, sporting organizations in Australia. And they were all saying, like, we absolutely love what you're doing. You know, it's such a good cause. I had gone with these products, and we were basically telling them how much plastic that they were saving, or how many plastic bottles they were saving by using our products. So just to give you an idea, for every rash vest that we sell or produce, there's between 12 and 14 bottles, depending on the size of the product. So these guys now are saying, you know, yeah, that's brilliant. We've just saved 1,500 plastic bottles at our event. We've banned single-use plastic at the event. And it's educating the kids that are coming up, which was the most important thing. So we were kind of, again, at that early stage, really trying to promote our brand. And we were getting, like I said, we got some traction, but those teams and events slowly started to get kind of bigger and bigger. And it was like, will we just focus solely on that? And we came to a point where we nearly got rid of the brand completely. But the thing that this is a marketing message, I suppose, is what we learned was that people wanted to be engaged with a brand. They didn't want to be engaged with, you know, a manufacturer, or, you know, they really valued that if someone Googled, you know, who they've partnered with to do this project, that they were landing on a very reputable brand. So what we said is, okay, let's keep the brand absolutely there, front and center, but let's really double down on what's working well for us. So kind of over, I'd say, a year, we expanded our product range from rash vests into recycled plastic, so polyester. So recycled plastic turns into polyester. So polyester polos, shorts, jackets. Now we've done, you know, rugby events, basketball events, sailing events, diving events, pretty much all the water sports, volleyballs, and then corporate gigs, you know, with Heineken and stuff like that, where we'd go and do like the bartenders polos. So we've now kind of got like 150 products that we are all sustainable, and people come to us to package the marketing message for them and really, I suppose, build sustainable merchandise for their company. And we've kind of gone through that, I'm going to say, teams and events and some corporate stuff, which we still are very much involved in, but we've ended up really finding our niche. And maybe coined the phrase kind of luxury hospitality. So we've now, I suppose now we work with, you know, the leading resorts around the world. So we would do all of the, I can name drop, we do all of the gift shop and all the staff uniform for Richard Branson's island, for Necker Island. So they have about 150 staff, and you know how something like that work is, those guys would basically, well, we contacted them, and yeah, there was 3 people put into a tender for that, and we were one of them. And they're used to just contacting an off-the-shelf uniform supplier that's doing their uniform. So then they come to us and they share their brand guidelines, and they'll share their story and their values. And we have an in-house design team, and our designers will sit down, come up with some, I think they're pretty impressive artwork, and we'll present it back to them. And then there's a couple of round of changes, and then they move through to production. And for Necker, you're talking, every staff member would probably like to have, somewhere between 3 and 5 polo shirts. So at the end of it, they end up, say, with, I'm going to say 2,000 units. So we are able to turn around to them and say, guys, here's a certificate to say, well done. By using your fabric, you've removed 30,000 plastic bottles from landfill, or better, it's from ocean waste. So one of the things that when I'm kind of doing these talks is there's an element of kind of educating people. So if you guys are involved at the moment in kind of plastic waste and things, you may even know some of this already, but when we're creating fabric, there's different origins of the fabric. So we're trying to be as transparent as we possibly can. So you can take, plastic bottles that have come from a recycling center pretty easily and create fabric from it, because they've been cleaned, they've been recycled properly, and they haven't been damaged. As you slowly work towards more deteriorated products, so like when we get into the fishing nets, and once we get into literally ocean waste, it's been lying in salt water for such a long time, then there's actually a chance that it will be too deteriorated for us to be able to recycle into something. So I'll share my screen in 2 seconds, and I'll just show you an example of kind of one of the projects that we'd work with. It's a 4 seasons out in the Maldives, to give you an idea. But I think what's probably more interesting for who's watching is the projects that we're involved with on a daily basis. So as a very sustainable company, we basically have 4 pillars. So our fabric being one, which is something that I think at the moment we're probably, I don't know anybody else. It's a big claim to say there's no one else in the world doing it, but I don't know anybody else who's actively kind of designing sustainable merchandise for other companies. So fabric is one of these pillars, and we pride ourselves on, we work with 3 fabric sourcing companies to always present to us the best in class. So tomorrow, if polyester is deemed that, there's a better replacement for polyester, we would move to that. And in the fashion industry, that's looking at biodegradable fabrics. That's that biodegradable or compostable fabrics. But again, the problem there is that it deteriorates too quickly at the moment. So the next is ocean impact, and that's one that probably strikes a chord with so many people. So we work with a company in Greece that's trying to clean up the Mediterranean, and for every product that we sell to a let's call them brand partners, is the name that we put on our clients. For every product that we sell, we pay €2.50 to this organization to take a kilo of ocean waste out of the ocean. And the way that they do that is quite unique, and we've researched so many different organizations, but these guys are basically paying fishermen in the Mediterranean. They've about 700 fishermen that they work with, to, instead of throwing, when they're putting in the nets, and instead of throwing the plastic back in, that they'll actually hand it in, and they get paid for that plastic. So we've set up our own project on the island of Lefkada, where I've been based, but we support the company as a overall kind of support the company as well. And one of the things that we do with them, and we're also doing in Ireland at the moment, is we're contacting the local fishermen to give them a way to recycle their nets. So we will actually take their nets, recycle it in a recycling facility. We then get, it's nearly like, the best way to explain it is like horse pellets or horse feed, and there's plastic versions of those. And we would then take that and then turn it into either fabric or a product. To give you one example, and this came through Bita the other day, was I was telling this story and I was introduced to Munster Rugby. So we're doing this project in Baltimore, a tiny fishing village in the west coast of Ireland. And again, we look to collaborate with people. So we don't have the network of retail stores or the massive online community to be able to sell lots of product, and that's not our business model. So again, we sit in the background where we contact the fishermen, test the nets, send them to this recycling facility. A perfect example now of the challenges is the first nets that we tested, they came back, they weren't actually the ones that they needed to be. So then we went back to the fisherman. He said, I've loads of other ones, sent up those ones, and they're the right fit. But we then take those pellets, and you sit down with someone like Munster Rugby and say, we would love to do an OceanR X Munster Rugby pair of sunglasses. And they then have a deal with the local sports stores. So in Ireland, it's Lifestyle Sports. So they would then strip feed them out into Lifestyle Sports and do a sell-through message like that. The only problem with that whole deal is that they haven't had people in a stadium since last March. So it's kind of tricky. The other two pillars are kind of a bit easier. The third pillar is basically community. And that in that community is basically always working with factories that are above board. So we only produce within Europe. And I've been to the factory, and some of the people that work in that factory drive nicer cars than I do. So it's always working within, I suppose, within an industry that's very regulated. And the majority of places these days are, like, I think China gets an awful bad name, but they actually are very above board nowadays. If you go further east, so again, educating kind of people to if you are looking at merchandise, to try and look closer to home and don't be kind of drifting towards Ethiopia and stuff like that, where you can get t-shirts for 30 cents. The other part there is actually trying to protect our ecosystems, so protecting our ocean ecosystems. And we work with an organization out in Sri Lanka, and it's a group of 7 islands, and they basically they patrol the 7 islands because the locals basically poach for turtle eggs. And I'll show you a video in 2 seconds. But they go out in the mornings, they look after the turtle eggs. If they find a nest, they bring them back to their conservation. I think they released something like 60,000 eggs last year. And again, we're looking at these kind of really small communities where they are doing incredible things, but they're struggling with fundraising. So I as a company, we're trying to support them by spreading their stories. So then hopefully people can also either support them, or if they work through us, then there's, again, for every €1,000 that we spend, €20. So just to give you an idea. So for every €1,000 we spend, €20 goes to the ocean impact pillar, €20 of it goes to the community side of things, and then €20 of it goes to the carbon neutral, which is our last pillar. So this year, so far, we went to becoming carbon neutral. So we plant trees with a company called Plant for the Planet. And if there's anybody that's ever interested in planting trees, I'd encourage you to come and have a chat with me. We've worked and I suppose interviewed a lot of the tree planting companies, and these guys I think are by far the best. So what I'll do is I'll just, if I share, which hopefully it works, if I share this and just, I'm going to show you guys. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah. So this will give you an idea. So this is the guys that we work with in Batu. So this just give you a quick idea.
Quite new and quite a small NGO located in Tenga Island. Our main goal is the protection of the different ecosystems and endangered species as well.
We do daily
7
a.m. walking patrol, where we patrol every beaches in Tenga Island looking for nests. We need to do this every morning because you could not know what you can find, basically.
I would start my day with a boat patrol where we use the boats to go around the Johor Islands. And what we do is that we look for turtle tracks on the sand, and we do that early in the morning because we want to arrive before the poachers.
Quite fresh, right? Down track or up track? So this is the body pit, right? She was right here. So we are in a boat patrol, and we found this successful nest. So we are moving the eggs to our island because they're going to be much protected, and we're going to take care of them. Okay, so we're going to allow them to grow, and once they hatch, release them, trying to protect them from different predators. Okay, so take all the sand from the bottom. Perfect. So we have our nest, guys. Well done. I'm just afraid of this place. It's shaping pretty cool. 45, so a little bit more. If I remember well, I think it's around like 16,000 hatchlings that we have released. It can seem like a really high number, but actually talking about sea turtle hatchlings is not that high, because there is that average that says that only 1 in 1,000 is going to survive or is going to reach the adulthood.
Brilliant.
Back to you. So that's the batu, guys. There's one other thing that I'll wrap up with this, is just to give you a snippet of where or what we do. So sorry now for you guys looking at each other. So this is one of our clients' presentations recently. So this is kind of our bread and butter, and it could be a Four Seasons, it could be a Heineken, it could be a local charity, it could be anybody that's basically trying to offer merchandise, but they've got a sustainable, they've got sustainable values that they want to portray through their merchandise. So again, these guys luckily weren't as impacted by COVID as I would have thought, and they've been open. So we do a variety of organic cotton products. So here's just a quick, I'll flick through it very quickly, I won't dwell on it. So we do organic t-shirts, polos, hoodies, tops, but then you start going into the polyester stuff, which is swimsuits, tech tees, shorts and things like that. So they're a very kind of dark, their brand guidelines are very dark, a lot of earthy colors, and the traditional Four Seasons tree. Now, if this, again, if this was a much more vibrant company, then we would have obviously gone much more vibrant. So kids stuff. So in this presentation, you would have seen staff uniform and also stuff for the gift shop. Here's kind of a changing poncho. So they're all very into the water. And then these have become very popular during COVID, which obviously acting as a mask. And we did a number of face masks last year when things started to change. So I think we were one of the first, or one of the only, to do a recycle ocean waste face mask, and we ended up on CNN and Forbes, and Leonardo DiCaprio was sharing it on his social media, which was very funny. But yeah, so what I wrap up because I've been waffling for so long, but basically, if there is anybody that ever wants to sit down and have a conversation about anything to do with sustainability in general, our goal, I think, over the next year is basically to obtain B Corp status. So if anybody is familiar with B Corp, so we're just working our way through that, and our application should be in by the end of the month. And long term, the goal is basically to get to a circular economy. So I touched on it the last time I was on, was there's only one or two companies in the world that are actually doing kind of like this take back model, where that you can actually that they'll recycle it on to the next stage. The thing that upsets us as a company is we work with, say, the Four Seasons. They buy 1,000 products, 1,000 polo shirts, and then 6 months later they need their staff to again look, you know, very presentable, so they need to upgrade to the next 1,000 products. So in an ideal world, we are looking for that partnership where we would actually receive the products back and be able to recycle them appropriately onto stuffing of a car seat, or or stuffing of a teddy bear, or stuffing of a dog bed, or something like that. So if anybody, like I said, if anybody's on the call, they want to talk to me now or later, I'd really appreciate if you guys can follow us on LinkedIn. Would be brilliant. If there's something that you like, then hopefully you could maybe share it in the coming months. But yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Brilliant. Now, I'm not sure whether we're going to do a Q&A here or we're going to go back into the room. Sarah, can you help me, please?
You need to do it here, my darling. If you go back into the room, you'll all be on your individual tables.
Okay, because I want to get a one-to-one with Jenny, with Tom, and Jenny will know what that's about, because it's perfectly. Is there any questions from the room while we're here before we go back to the room? Well, that'll come up in the Q&A.
Yeah, it'll come up in the Q&A. If anyone wants to put anything in the chat or the Q&A, we can spot it.
I just wanted to say thank you so much, Tom, and that certainly wasn't waffling at all. It's all really, really interesting. Makes me want to go and help the turtles, I have to say. I always wanted to be one of those bounty hunters when I was a kid, you know, the ones that are on the perfect beaches eating coconut chocolate, though, not one that's finding criminals. But yeah, absolutely amazing, and a lovely story as well of how you got into what you do, and you know, coming from a family with windsurfing and sailing, it sounds quite idyllic. I have to say that it sounds very similar to my youth as well, which was all out on the water. So thank you very much for that. It was really interesting, and yeah, I just can't get enough of when you talk, to be honest. It's great.
The biggest thing for me there was 1 in 1,000 survival for the turtles.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
That's the turtle one's a really interesting one. So just we get contacted by so many organizations to help them, you know, so, and you are also running a business, so you can't support everybody. And then you then sit down, like we sit down with everybody, and you have a chat, and you say, like, we'd love to help. But when we sat down with those guys, it was very evident that there wasn't one thing that I could recommend for them to do better. So they go to the local schools to educate the kids, because they want, when they grow up, to kind of break this cycle, which is really important for us. We don't work with people if they don't do the education part of it. They then do the patrolling. So they're there every morning patrolling, looking for poachers of these eggs, which go for about £1 in the local market, but they're a local delicacy. But then when we would all kind of throw our hands up and kind of, oh, it's appalling, blah blah blah, and they look at it from, this is steeped in their tradition. You know, they've been doing this for years to survive, and they need to educate the next generation to come up that if they keep doing that, they're going to lose their tourism trade. They're going to, people won't go there. People will boycott the place. And then they also do beach cleans. So they did 12,000 kilos last year of marine debris from that area. And you kind of just sit back and you're like, you're a tiny, tiny organization doing like amazing work. And if we can, support that in any way, then it's obviously a benefit.
Yeah, brilliant. Fantastic.
Okay, so shall we go back into the room then? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.